So you've grown those iced potatoes, spuds, or we just call them taters. You know, you grew out a good crop, you're proud of yourself. Now it's time for us to talk about when to harvest them and how to harvest them.
Hi, I'm Charlie. And I'm May.
And I'm Greg. And we planted these potatoes behind me about the 1st of March. Now they've been in the ground about 75 days. If you go to Google and Google when to harvest potatoes, days to maturity, it's going to show you about 95 to 110 days. What makes a big difference is where you at in the heat units you have. Our potatoes are not about 75 days old, and you know what? They're ready to harvest. So sometimes you just got to realize those days of maturity could be off some by the location you're in and about the heat units that we've had and the weather. Now with all that being said, the weather pattern has a lot to do when I decide to harvest our potatoes. Now this year seems to be a dry year and it's been perfect for growing potatoes. Now I didn't put drip irrigation underneath them. I normally don't, because during the time of the year that I grow potatoes, I normally get plenty of rain to make potatoes and I don't need the drip irrigation. I've used it before, but 9 times out of 10 I just don't need it. But if I have a wet year, it makes a difference on how I harvest my potatoes. Being a dry year, you want them potatoes dry when you harvest them. You don't want to dig them in wet soil. If I've got my potatoes ready to harvest and I know that I got a few extra dry days in the calendar there, I don't have to be in no big hurry to get out here and get them up. They'll hold for a few days. However, if we got a bad storm coming or we got a lot of rain coming, then I know I may have to dig them a little bit early. So it makes a big difference about your weather pattern. Do I want to go ahead and dig them a few days early, or can I just let them sit there a few days? What you don't want them to do is sit in that wet soil for several days, because that could cause some problems with disease on your potatoes. Well, May, Charlie, and I planted 2 rows of potatoes back the 1st of March, a row of Yukon Golds and a row of German Butterballs. Now that it's time to harvest them, we need to think about, well, how are we going to do that? Well, some people take a tractor and they take a single plow behind that. They call them potato plows, or they got other names for them, and they plow them up and just go through there and dig them. Well, we don't do that. We don't have enough potatoes to dig with a tractor, and plus we don't put a tractor in our garden. So what we do is we do it by hand, and we use forks to dig them. Now this right here is what we call the common pitchfork. Now this is going to work real good when we get through digging those potatoes and we have to get those vines out of the garden and put them in the compost bin. This is the fork we want to use for that job. But it's not the fork to use when we dig those taters. It's too light. They're probably going to bend if we get in there and put a lot of pressure on them. They're just not designed for that. And you know what? Space is too big for those potatoes. We're going to lose a lot of little taters in there sifting through that. Don't you think so?
Yeah.
Okay. Got everybody on board here. What you do want is what we call a digging fork. And then these digging forks are a lot more substantial. Actually, that one there and this one right here, this one has a little closer spacing. But those have pretty wide spacing too, but they are very heavy duty, and we can get down in there and put a lot of pressure on these things to push those potatoes up out of the ground. I like a short handle fork. Now this is one that my mother bought me when I was about 19 years old, believe it or not, and I've had it for a long time. It was made in England. And I've took care of it. And now this one is the one we sell now. This is an all steel construction digging fork. It has the pad on there that you can move from left to right. I think this one's set up for a right-handed person. Another short handle, D-handled fork. We like to make it a big ordeal when we dig taters, get all our help together, get our wheelbarrow together. And now it's time for us to dig some taters. Pretty much deciding factors on when I harvest my potatoes. How well the vine looks and how big they are and how they spread open there. Now a lot of times you'll start seeing your vines start dying back, and that's a pretty good indication. You can see right here how this one started dying back a little bit, starting to look a little bit rough. But one of the best indications is when they get long and they start laying over. Then we know it's time to get them out of the ground. So what I do is just reach down there and grab the vines and I pull them up and we see there's a few on there. Now we're gonna put these over there in the wheelbarrow. These are nice and dry, just like they want to be. You don't want to dig these in wet soil. Well, we made some pretty good sized taters, girls. What y'all think?
Yes.
These Yukon Golds are pretty good ones. They're one of my favorite varieties. We dug about a 35-foot row and ended up with a pretty good bunch of potatoes here. Yep, and you see how nice and clean they are? They're going to store really well. Now on a wet year, you'll notice that they'll be diseased up a little bit. They don't store as good, but you have to make the best of what you got. These, I can tell you by looking at them, are going to store for about 6 to 8 months. Now, some of you out there is going to be wanting to wash your potatoes and get that dirt off of them and get them clean because that's just how you are. But that's not what you want to do. You want to leave that dirt on them right there when you store them, because if you wash them, that's going to introduce bad bacteria and they're not going to store as well. They're going to break down a lot sooner. Now, you say to yourself, well, the ones I get in the grocery store clean, well, they got a special solution that they wash theirs in to help counteract that. For us home gardeners, just leave the dirt on them. When you get ready to prepare them, it's going to be the time to wash them. Well, how do you store them potatoes? Well, when I was a boy, my granddad lived in an old farmhouse, and underneath that farmhouse was open. And they stored their potatoes underneath there. And if you think about it, it was an ideal spot. It was out of direct sunlight, it was out of the rain, and it was in a nice, cool place. They'd send us young'uns underneath there to get taters out when they wanted to miss taters. So we'd have to shimmy underneath that house there to get them taters. But we don't do that anymore because our house has been a little different now, and we don't have those open crawl spaces underneath there. So what we do is we put them underneath the barn. Now, preferably, like I said, you want a cool, dry place where no moisture gets to them with some pretty good airflow. And we're just going to pour them out on the ground and kind of sift them out single layer. You don't want them touching no more than possible, but I know we're all limited on room. And we just let them stay there until we get ready to use them. Well, potatoes are fun to grow, but not only that, they're one of the greatest things you can grow to maintain a good food source. These things are store for months, and you just come out here to the barn and get them whenever you want to. And in today's world, we're a little uncertain about things. It's just a great thing to have as grocers in the barn. Also teaches these girls where French fries come from. So in my book, taters is in the top 5 that every homesteader should be growing.
It's hot. Can we go now? You did hardly any work. Mm.